Well, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. As you know, today's topic, there are different topics every month, but today's topic is navigating the American college system. And we're very fortunate to have a guest speaker. You can introduce yourself. That's you. Yeah.
Good morning, folks. My name is Justin Shrewsbury. I'm the Dean of Undergraduate Admission and the Interim Vice President for Enrollment Management at Emerson College in Boston.
Right.
Good morning.
So, hi, good morning. We're just getting started. You haven't missed anything. So, welcome. So we have just a couple slides that we'll start off with, and then, we're going to turn it over to Justin. So the goals of today is to understand student options after high school. So again, here kids have a variety of options for post-secondary plans, and so we'll go over what some of those are. Key components of a student's college application, and identifying those areas that students can focus on in grades 9, 10, and 11 moving forward. So, options after high school. Trade schools, which include the trade or vocational schools, you may hear those words, which include everything from auto, welding, medical assisting, cosmetology, and more. There's a lot of trade options for students after high school. We also have service academies or enlisting in the military. Service academies are different than enlisting right away after high school. Service academies, students obtain an undergraduate degree while training to leave that institution as an officer in whatever branch they choose. Enlisting is different. Enlisting right after high school, students just need a high school diploma, and they enter the military right away. So different than going into a service academy where there are all kinds of academic requirements of students, actually pretty rigorous. And it's quite a competitive process, as opposed to students who enlist right out of high school, where really they're just signing up to serve right away, and then they have options for higher ed once their service is done, or sometimes while they're serving. It depends on which branch. Some of our kids love the idea of a gap year. A lot of times when we present these options to students, they hear about a gap year and they think, oh my God, I'm doing a gap year. Gap years are awesome. And then they realize that it's not just sitting around your basements. Gap years are really supposed to have some kind of focus, whether they're using it as an intern year, a service year. Sometimes gap years are around mission type work or service work, travel, etc. So gap years, just so you know, they may come home and say, my school counselor told me I could take a year off after high school. That's not really the impetus behind a gap year. It's really more about using that time in some kind of focused way. But they will hear that term. And then, obviously, the college and university route, which does include either a 2-year degree, usually at schools like community colleges. However, there are some private schools that are 2-year schools, or a 4-year school, which probably you're more familiar with. So the role of Shrewsbury High School in that process, right? We provide things to the students that they will use in the college process specifically. Recommendation letters from both teachers and counselors. Counselors are people like me and Tammy. We meet with students several times over their high school career, both in a group setting and individually. To discuss future planning and things like course selection, that is all centered around their goals, whatever they choose. Let's see, we offer opportunities for college reps, like Mr. Shrewsbury to come in, and usually every fall, it's close to almost 100 college reps come here to the high school to meet with students in a group setting, small group setting. Kids can sign up for that in their senior year. They sign up to attend one of those visits, and they can find all that information in their SCORE accounts. If they haven't talked to you about SCORE, ask your student about SCORE. They all have an account. They've all been introduced to SCORE. They've all used it, and it's a really helpful tool, especially starting this process 9th, 10th grade.
And then just a note, SCORE, it is spelled differently, it's SCOIR.
Right.
And if you are familiar with Naviance, we used to have it, we replaced it with SCORE, so essentially SCORE is our new Naviance.
Right. We offer help with application. We run a summer boot camp, we call it, for students to get a jump start on their college applications, because there are several parts. It can be a little complicated for students who maybe don't have older siblings that have gone through this process or are familiar with it at all. We offer a lot of application help for students, and then generally here to support your student no matter their goals. All right, and you as their family members. So Tammy, you want to take over this one?
Yes, so role of student and parent guardian. So for the student, my biggest message for students is quality over quantity, because it can get overwhelming, especially when you think, like 9th grade, I need to do more, 10th grade, I need to do more, and just keep adding. But I tell students, focus on the quality of it. So in terms of that, it's like keeping up academics and extracurriculars. There's kind of almost that mindset of, oh, I need to have 6 APs, I need to have everything honors, but it's a balancing act. So for me, for students, it's keeping up with the academics and the extracurriculars, making sure it's a good balance, making sure they're keeping up with the activities they like. It doesn't, if they want to major in engineering, do they have to be part of robotics? Not necessarily, like as long as they're doing activities that they genuinely enjoy. And if they have something that is related to their potential future major, that's awesome. If not, then that's what we're here for in the counselor role, is just to kind of talk about other interests. Last year I actually had a student want to go engineering. Her biggest activity was the knitting club on that one. And for that, she had a leadership position. She actually expanded the club. She made it more inclusive to other types of needlework on there. So just because that original knitting club now moved into the needlework club, just because it wasn't like her major, but it had a lot of skills that she could show off. So for other things for students is just kind of continue the research. So part of the reason why we wanted to share with you just other options after high school is because I've noticed a lot of students have told me, I'm undecided, I don't know what I want to do. So the research is really critical in knowing, it doesn't have to be the exact major, but just what's the community that you feel like you'll be most comfortable with, what programs are most important for you. I have one student right now who just purely wants to spend as much time abroad as possible, and if possible, just get the degree abroad or be in a campus that has an international campus. So that's kind of where the research part comes in, is just finding out the best fits. Scheduling meetings with the school counselor. So we do meet with students at least twice a year, a little bit more for juniors and seniors, but for 9th graders and 10th graders. When students are able to schedule meetings with us, that's awesome. I love it when I see students schedule meetings with me to discuss their courses, discuss their goals. I even have a student who will once a quarter just schedule a meeting so he can give me an update about things that he's doing. So the more that a student meets with us, the more we get to know them, and then we can help navigate goals, whether it's job, work permits, internships, and then
Summer programs. Yeah.
And just kind of finding the good balance for everything. And then later on, as they get into the college application process, the student is responsible for the application itself, so filling out each of the applications, going over the transcript requests with us. And then for the parent and guardian, you guys, your role is to be the support for them. Just say what questions they have, talking with them about the options, just kind of, they might feel undecided, feel like, oh, I should go to this because it will make my parents happy. I do know for me growing up, my parents told me I could be whatever I wanted as a doctor, as a lawyer, engineer. I clearly did not listen to them. But once I got into high school and was ready for this, my parents, the message wasn't just like, oh, here's your 3 career options. It was, we want you to be successful. We want you to have a career. And then it's like, okay, great, because I was definitely not enjoying accounting class. I did not want to do that either.
I think the other, if I can jump in, sorry Tammy, the other thing we see a lot is, kids in their respective friend groups or peer groups, whatever those may be, sometimes they put pressure on themselves, right? The kids all talk, they share what they're doing, and maybe it's around academics or extracurriculars. And the kids put a lot of pressure on themselves sometimes, meaning I have to do more, I've got to do better, I've got to, right? So any support that you can give your child to say, look, we just want you to be happy, healthy, and have a good balance in your life between friends, family, school, and those extracurriculars. So watch for signs of that too. Sometimes it's not families putting pressure on kids, but sometimes it's the pressure they put on themselves that we see. So just watch for that.
Yeah, that's a really great point, because then there's definitely a lot of students, they'll talk to each other, and then, they'll say, oh, but so-and-so, like, oh, Susie's doing all these things, and she's, like, has whatever these things are, and it's just kind of not knowing what Susie's going through, or they might say, oh, well, Tammy's doing all these things. So this is also part for reminding your students to focus on quality over quantity. It's really sad when I meet with students and go over, like, their goals and courses, the electives that you should consider, and they're afraid to take the courses because they're afraid that it's going to hurt their GPA. They're afraid that it's not going to look good, even though when they look at it on paper, like, oh, this course would be perfect for me. So just kind of reminding them, just like take things that you're interested in on there, and then just helping them with the research part. I think a big part will be around the financial aid, helping them research and navigate through that. And then just like encouraging them to research for like colleges, going to those visits with them. Most of them can't drive, or you probably want to drive them to the visits too.
Right. I think generally speaking, a big difference between the college process here in the US and other countries is that generally speaking, there's a more holistic approach to the college process here in the US, where in other countries it's much more at times focused on how they do on a test, and that's it, that determines your path, or they're tracked, in other countries sometimes, like, well, from this grade on, this is what you're studying, and this is the path you're taking, and that's it. In the US, it's a much more holistic approach. Would you agree?
Yeah,
Yes.
and especially for folks who are more familiar with, let's say, the UK system, which is very exam focused. And even if you had gone to college previously where so much was invested in the SATs or ACTs, even that has changed drastically in, like, let's say, the last 10 years.
Right.
But that's not as much of a requirement as it used to be. It's more about their entire experience in their high school tenure. That's what is really looked at by colleges, rather than just how they did on one Saturday morning. Yeah, so
we'll turn it over.
I'll say also your role as parents is to let go. It is one of the things that I had a phone call with 2 parents last night who had never visited our campus, and they just wanted to talk to me about what it's like being on campus, just for their own peace of mind. And that's also, there's going to be an adjustment period for you as parents in a few years. We have some 9th grade parents and 10th grade parents. But eventually, if your students elect to go to college, they could be potentially moving to an on-campus residence hall, maybe across the country if they so desire. So there's going to be an adjustment period for you as well, that you're getting used to the idea now, and you got a few more years, but it's gonna be coming. I like to start with the idea of, what is it that the student is looking for out of a college experience? Is it for economic reasons? Is it for a career? We were we were talking about, you know, these 3 career paths you're allowed to choose. Well, that is a conversation you should have. Is it social? Are they looking to maybe break out of their shell? Are they looking to start to meet new people from different countries? Are they looking to go on for future education if they wanted to go to law school or medical school, or to be some type of practitioner, let's say in the health sciences, that requires a master's degree, social work? You have to start thinking about that as well, because sometimes, for some professions, a bachelor's degree is not enough to be a practitioner in that field. So when you think about that, you start to boil down to why is your student looking to go to college, and what are they looking to get out of college? When you're thinking about searching for colleges, this is a huge, when they start getting into junior year, you start to build the list of schools that they are looking to apply for. Are they looking for a 2-year path, let's say at a community college? Are they looking for a 4-year path? The connotation of an associate's degree versus a bachelor's degree. You don't necessarily need a bachelor's degree for every single career. There are many, there was actually an article in the Wall Street Journal this week about how many good paying jobs there are out there in the trades and with only an associate's degree. You start thinking about location. Are they looking to be, let's say, in a community like Shrewsbury? Are they looking to be more rural? Are they looking to be in a city? These are factors you want to think about and have those conversations with your student about what they're looking to get out of college in. Programs and majors, and we're going to talk about this a lot because it's always on people's minds, but what are they interested in? We talked about robotics. Are they interested in engineering? Are they interested in something in the health sciences field? Are they interested in the performing arts? Start thinking about that, and thinking about working with their school counselors about electives that might channel that energy and that excitement they have into what they might want to study later. Cost. College can be expensive. A lot of times you hear that college is expensive. It can be expensive, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but cost is a major factor. Typically, if you go to a in-state institution, let's say in the UMass system, or one of the state universities or community college, you typically have lower tuition rates because you're an in-state student. That's a factor you want to think about, as opposed to going out of state or at a private university where those costs are typically higher. Do they want to have some type of specialization or identity base, such as a minority serving institution, such as a historically black college university, a women's college? We talked about military service academies, like West Point or Annapolis. Also the size of the institution. Do they want to be in a school that is small? Do they want to be in large lecture halls? Do they want to have faculty-student ratios that are more in the teens versus the 30s? These are factors that you want to think about, because if your student likes to have, wants to be in a classroom where there's 200 people in it, then you might want to think about a larger institution.
I think one of the things you're seeing probably is choice, that word choice. Kids have a lot of choice in this process about, again, their interests, things they want out of the experience, again, location, right? So that's a lot for some kids, and they're gonna need your support to navigate that, so.
Also, I think this actually reminded me from when we went to the 11th grade classes. Something I try to point to kids is, what's your best learning style? Because some students, they cannot stand the idea of being in one person in a lecture hall of 300. They need like that smaller class environment. They need more one-on-one with the teacher. They want the professor to be like a PhD, doctorate holding professor for their instructor, not a graduate assistant. So it's also kind of like, what's the best learning style for them? Like, can they do well if they're 1 out of 300? Like I was for my university, most of mine were 2 to 300 class sizes. Or do they need that kind of, Shrewsbury, we have about 20, 25, or 50, like where do they fit?
Where did you go again, Tammy?
Binghamton. It's a state university in New York,
Oh, yes,
Binghamton. So that's like another factor too, like, one student might be able to handle it, another student might feel more comfortable in a smaller class setting, or a different calendar system school year, or even a school that's going to focus more on hands-on learning, hands-on projects.
I did my undergrad at Northeastern, which has a huge co-op program and a big internship program. That appealed to me. So that was not even on my bullet point. So that was the idea of, that's something where you also want to think about, what are they actually doing on campus? Are they interested in sports? Are they interested in being at a college or university that has a big sports presence, even if they're not playing on those teams?
Right.
If they want to go see college football, you want to go down into the southeastern or southern part of the country, not as much up here. So when we talk about the college admission process, there's some key application components that you're going to hear more about this, so that if this is your first exposure to the college admission process, these are just the different kind of touch points or tasks that your student will have to do. There's typically a core application. You may have heard of this concept called the Common App, or Coalition is another one. But it's essentially your student has an account, they fill out kind of the core information, their background, their demographic information, their coursework, and then they could reuse that same, let's call it 75% of their application. They could reuse that at multiple schools. So instead of you having to fill out the same form at, let's say, 10 schools that they're applying to, if they all were on the Common App, you could reuse that core component and not have to start from scratch or reinvent the wheel every single time. Their academic history, which is typically a high school or college transcript if they're transferring, but that would be from Shrewsbury High School. The school would send the college the transcript and updated ones as, let's say, first trimester or second trimester rolls around, we'd get updated transcripts directly from the school counseling office. We also get a school profile and report, which is also provided by the school counseling office. That gives some information about Shrewsbury High. It also gives information about kind of how your student is kind of performing relative to the institution, how many AP courses are offered, things about the school, just so the college admissions officer, who might not be familiar with how things work at each individual high school, the grading scale that's used, that's just a standard thing that's provided by the school to us. The all-important essays and writing supplement, I probably should have put an asterisk on there because with things like ChatGPT and generative AI, this is becoming a little bit more of a conversation rather than a must-have. I will say that the essays are something that has been historically agonized by students over. With things like ChatGPT, where they can maybe get you 50% of the way there on an essay, or potentially more if they really want to be extreme about it, I would say the most important thing is that it's about the student and it's about their own experiences, rather than trying to have the perfect essay that we want to read. It's a chance for your student to express themselves and their life experiences, and no generative AI software can do that. It doesn't have, can't read our minds and about our life experiences. The extracurriculars, what they're doing both here in terms of clubs and organizations and sports teams, and also outside in the community. These are really important things. We talk about quality over quantity. It's sometimes best to have one club or organization that they really have a passion about, that they've been in a leadership role, that they've revolutionized the knitting club. That's what we want to see, not necessarily a list of 30 organizations that they do sporadically.
Right.
So this is a balancing act that you want to do with your students. You know, if they're really passionate about knitting, if they're really passionate about the robotics team, if they're really passionate about volunteering, that's what we want to see. We want to see sustained efforts in these extracurriculars and potentially some advances in leadership. If they're the president of the club or the treasurer of the club or they started a club, these are the types of things that we want to see, because these are the types of students, the self-starting, the leaders. That's what we want to see on a college campus. Not necessarily a laundry list of all the clubs and organizations. So find that balancing act. Letters of recommendation, often from, depending on the school, but generally one from a school counselor, one from a teacher, potentially more. I always like to say it's actually best to have a teacher that knows your student, right, even if they struggled in that class, because the teacher will have insights into maybe perseverance. They struggled in the first trimester and they bounced back by staying late and asking lots of questions. They were shy in the beginning of the school year, and then they came out of their shell and really started expressing themselves. Those are good things. Even if they got a B or a C, to see that in a letter of recommendation that we have to read and say, oh, they really progressed and evolved as a person, as a student, that's actually sometimes better. Test scores, I put in parentheses, if required. Some schools in the last few years are making standardized tests such as the SAT or ACT mandatory again. During COVID, unless you were on a military academy or in Florida, you pretty much didn't have to do an SAT or ACT. Some, especially the highly selective elite schools, are going back to it. but many schools don't require the SAT or ACT. That's drastically different than when I went to college where you had to do it. We at Emerson, the fall 23 class that we just enrolled, I believe the number was 28% gave an SAT or ACT. That's us, though, we're a little bit different of a school, but you'll see in some schools like WPI down the road, you can't even give them a test score. They don't want to see it.
They don't give
They're
it-
test blind is what it's called.
Right.
And then depending on the program, you might have, if they're interested in an art program, something more on the creative, some have interviews or auditions. That's another thing to check on. That's more specialized type programs, but it's something to keep in mind that it can be a huge component of your student's application.
Would you say too, before we move on to the next slide, that generally speaking, this does not go for just Emerson? Like
This is pretty much everybody.
most colleges are looking for this kind of package from students. Okay, all right.
So this is another thing, this can be a little confusing. These are what I call decision plans or rounds and the timeline. You've probably heard of some of these, if not, it's okay, you still have plenty of time. Early action, which means you get a decision earlier. Early decision, which is binding. If you get admitted to that school, the student have to go there, but I have to walk that back a little bit because you don't have
They
to.
sign a contract, let's say that.
But it's not exactly the most
Right.
sticky of contracts out
Right.
there. And then there's regular decision, which happens later in the year. There's what's called rolling admission, which is your student applies and then is admitted more on a rolling basis. Every 2 or 3 weeks they'll get a decision. I probably should have put another asterisk next to May 1st. This is what's called the National Candidates Reply Day. You'll hear it called signing day or commitment day, deposit deadline. This year with the issues with the free application for federal student aid or FAFSA, this is a bit of a moving target. Your students will not have to deal with any of that mess, thankfully.
Hopefully.
Oh, they better not.
Yeah.
But this is typically when their student has to decide where they would like to enroll, or enroll at all. They can be admitted, they can be deferred, which is kind of like a wait list. They can be waitlisted, they can be denied, they can be admitted to another term, another campus. This is all kind of confusing, and it's
Yeah.
kind of like a chessboard, but the idea is, at the end of this, I've got a link to a guide you can download. It's got all this explained. But the idea is that there are, once again, talk about choices, there's lots of entry points and different timelines for your student as well.
Right.
And it's based on how interested they are in the school and based on what their timeline is as well.
Yeah.
Most important thing is to pay attention to deadlines. Students who procrastinate and who fall behind on deadlines, that can hurt them.
Yes.
If they submit their applications late, they might not make the first cutoff. So deadlines are the most important thing, and you as parents, have a spreadsheet, have something printed on the fridge or laminated or whatever it is. Here are the 10 schools you want to apply, here are their deadlines. Because keeping track of those will just lower your blood pressure significantly if you just stay on top of those. Most institutions have a portal with a checklist, and then oftentimes you just want to check your email. Schools and colleges and universities love to email. You get a lot of emails in Shrewsbury Public Schools as well as I'm a parent of 3 in Shrewsbury Public Schools. Check your email, because that's where a lot of these updates happen.
Justin, can you, from your perspective, why would a student choose regular decision or early action? What would make that deadline a good fit for them?
So early action means you get a decision earlier. So they've completed the application earlier. They want to get their decision in the preceding December or January timeline. It gives them more time to decide. Typically, you start to see students doing that if they are really want to show an interest to the school and they have gotten a lot of their application done earlier. Regular decision, that gives a little bit more time to apply, a little bit less time to decide. So it's really a matter of what they want to do. It's not binding. It doesn't. Some schools have some really crazy ones. I'm not going to get into those.
Right.
But for the most part, it's about their own timing, their own timeline. Early action, we typically only have grades through junior year.
That's
Regular
what I was
decision,
gonna
we usually have mid-year grades.
Yes.
Maybe by the time we make a decision, you might have first trimester from Shrewsbury High, but most of the time it's based off of the first 3 years of college.
Right, that's what I was going to add. Sometimes the decision for kids to apply early versus regular has to do with grades.
Yeah.
again, if you're looking at a November deadline especially, and there are even some schools that have an October deadline, they're not a lot, but there are some, that deadline will only see a transcript through the end of junior year. So sometimes for a student, they really need that first semester senior year to kind of get their footing again, maybe boost that GPA a little bit more, show a college that they're taking some rigorous coursework. So that also plays into a decision, because if you'll remember this year, quarter one, for example, didn't even end until almost the end of November. It was like November 27th or something. So for some kids, they need that first semester senior year to really show what they can do and show a consistent effort on their part over the course of their transcript. So that can, yes.
So if a student applies for early action and they don't get it, are they still on hold to do the regular
That's a
action?
good-
They
That's a
could
really
be, and
good
that's what that
question.
defer to a different round is. It's basically you're moved to the next pool
Gotcha.
to be reevaluated. Some students are denied up front, and that can be a chilling kind of effect, but
Yeah.
it kind of depends on where they're at. And also, schools have certain targets of number of students and by majors and from different parts of the country and backgrounds. So these targets that they have, let's say they only have 100 spots for nursing. If they fill them all up at early action, then no one gets in enrolling at regular decision. So the idea is they might do 50 at early action and then hold another 50 spots for regular decision. Your student who, let's say, didn't get in on the first pass would have another bite at that apple in regular decision to get one of those second group of 50 spots.
It's a great question to ask, though, when Tammy was talking about that research piece. That's a great question to ask schools that you're visiting or touring or going to an info session or a college fair. It's a really good question to ask. How does your school handle early action decisions? You know, is it the doors closed, or do they automatically get, that's a really good question to keep in mind.
Or even like special deadlines too. So for example, sometimes nursing programs can have an earlier deadline, scholarships sometimes have an earlier deadline, and it's just doesn't mean that, you know, you apply early action per se, or
They
they
just
have
have
early
an
action,
early
but you just
deadline.
have to submit everything and be done by November, December, or something.
Deadlines.
You had a
So
question?
yes, same question to early actions. So what about the program? So it's similar to regular, you know, applications?
It's generally the same application,
Same application
Yes.
usually.
just different timelines.
Yep.
What about the scholarship spot? So basically it's like a,
Generally, I say generally speaking, there's equal chances at scholarships with different rounds. Some that are specific, you know, Tam was talking about, there are some especially large scholarships that you have to apply earlier in the process. But generally speaking, the general scholarships, it doesn't really matter when you apply. Large, highly competitive ones, let's say into an honors program, they might have different deadlines as well. But once again, just
Yeah.
check on the deadlines on those.
Yeah, like BU has a trustee scholarship that's really big and competitive, and that has its own separate app and deadline. So again, research, we can't say it enough. Yeah.
Financial
And then
aid.
there's this.
I said college can be expensive, and there's a reason for that. Financial aid can be confusing, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. But also it's important as parents and family members to ask lots of questions. Much of the financial aid information that you supply into this process is coming from you, and it is a family decision. As much as your student wants to go to a school, there's costs associated with that, and you have to have those conversations. What is listed as a cost of attendance is often not what students pay.
Ooh, music's gonna come up.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. In a second, music is gonna start
Oh, no worries.
playing.
I'll,
'Cause
I'll,
it's
I'll,
Friday.
I'll try and make financial aid a little bit more musical.
Sorry.
Uh,
It's so loud, sorry.
maybe we should have a music channel. Financial aid portion. So this is what's called sticker price versus what you actually pay or your net price. So the idea is, if you see on a college website it costs $70,000, oftentimes students don't pay that. With forms of what's called gift aid or scholarships or grants, money that you don't have to pay back. There are different types of financial aid. There's need grant-based aid, such as grants and loans. You can borrow as much as people don't want to borrow for college. It can be a helpful tool. Scholarships, I also say don't pay for scholarships. Sometimes there's companies out there who are trying to get you to pay a few $1,000s to get scholarships. Don't do that. Just, there's plenty of free money out there that your student may apply for, so don't pay for a scholarship. Generally, scholarships come from the admissions office, but there's scholarships from private foundations, from local organizations here in town. Those can help defray the cost.
Sometimes too from your workplaces.
Yep.
So always check with your HR or like a corporate head office. A lot of times parents will offer scholarships to children of employees. So always check.
Institutions sometimes do, Rotary clubs, things like that, can sometimes have scholarships for members. It may not be a lot in terms of the grand scheme of things, but it might help for books, it might help for travel back and forth to campus, it might help for a semester's worth of tuition. So check with your HR office, check with your organizations that you're affiliated with to see if those are options. And then there's just private foundations out there that there's money, there's millions of dollars every year left on the table that your student just has to apply for. There's also work options. One of them that's commonly called for the work study. Even if you don't qualify for work study, there's on and off campus employment options as well. I generally tell students when they arrive on a college campus, get a job, let's say in the library. That's on campus. It might not pay as well, but they can also, between restacking shelves and working with students, they can study at the same time and earn some money. But it's also, they don't have to worry about shifts as much or the time commitment. That's a good way to defray some of the costs while not disrupting their first semester or first year on campus to kind of get acclimated being a college student. This link is, and you can just search for, it's called NATGAP, the Guide to the College Admissions Process. It's a free, it's about a 100-page document. It's a lot, but if you want to talk about research, this is the authoritative guide on all things college admissions process in the United States. It's done by the professional organization that involves both school counselors and college admission professionals. So both of us, both sides of the house are contributing to this. And all that we kind of know and advise students, it's all jammed together in one honker of a PDF. But this guide, you want to learn about the different rounds and timelines and how to apply for scholarships. It's all there. And it's, like I said, it's 100 pages, but it's your entire encyclopedia about all of college admissions.
Yes. Okay. Again, these slides will be on the website too, so we'll probably post it later today. Again, these are just some frequently asked questions that we get. I mean, look them over. We touched on a lot of these things.
The declare a major one is one of the ones that is so dependent on what your student wants to study. We talk about nursing programs. Oftentimes you have to declare a major because nursing programs are in hot demand. It's a hot demand profession. It's also generally one of the more competitive programs out there to get into. Oftentimes you have to apply as a nursing major to get into the nursing program. Oftentimes you can't transfer into the program, let's say in their sophomore year or second year of college. There's no side door into a nursing program. So even if there is, it can be extremely competitive. We at Emerson, we're an arts and communication school, we have a highly competitive musical theater program. You have to, 99 times out of 100, you have to get in on the first try because it is that competitive. We have an acceptance rate in that program in the teens, 15%. So it's very, very competitive, and oftentimes for those highly competitive programs like nursing, you have to declare a major on the application. You have to really give it your all in that first pass. Other programs, you can apply as an undecided or undeclared student, find their way around, take some their core general education courses, some electives, to find themselves a little bit in what they want to study. Some schools are might be 50% undeclareds. Some colleges and universities might be 5% undeclareds. It really depends on their focus. But I would just say the most important thing is if there's for highly competitive programs, yes, you do need to declare a major, and oftentimes it's that one shot. So if your student is interested in, let's say I touch on nursing because that's the common one that I hear a lot about. They want to become a nurse and they want to get that BSN, the Bachelor's of Science in Nursing, and they don't get it on their first pass, they really should consider another school at that point to try and get into a BSN program.
So these are just some questions that we get. Do you have any questions though, whether they're on this little list or not?
Do you talk about the last two?
What grades do colleges see for early action regular decision? So that, it's basically,
That's what we were talking about.
yeah, so
before.
this would be oftentimes first marking period, first quarter, first trimester for early action. For regular decision, we would have mid-year grades. So we'd have essentially half a year of grades at that point.
So for us here at the high school, here's how we report grades for seniors applying. They either get the transcript through junior year, if they're applying really early. Then they see a quarter one transcript from Shrewsbury, so that's around the end of November, very early December. And then they see a semester transcript. And then they won't see another transcript until the student deposits, tells us where they're going, and then every college receives a final transcript for a student. So those are the transcripts that they get from us. Sometimes colleges might ask for a progress update, or say a student might be on the fence and the admissions office is really working to accept the student, and they might say, can you give us a snapshot of their grades right now? That's a less formal way that sometimes we communicate with admissions offices, but for Shrewsbury, generally speaking, those are the transcripts that colleges see, either through junior year, quarter one, or semester one, and that's it.
There was and I would say, even if your student, let's say, had a rough 9th or 10th grade, if they're showing positive trend, that's actually a really important thing.
Upward trend,
Upward
that's what
trend
we call it.
is a really important thing. Negative or downward trend is also a bit of a red flag for us. So if they came in strong, had a 4.0 or 4.3, you folks go to?
We have a 5.0.
5.0, thank you.
Mhm.
I gotta get used to that. My
Right.
kid's insured right now. Eventually gotta get that used to. If they have straight A's in 9th and 10th, but then 11th grade, they start to slip a little bit, that's a bit of a red flag. Junior year is the most representative sample of who they are as a student. So we at Emerson really hone in on that 11th grade grades,
Right.
because that's the one that we have, like I said, it's the most recent set of academic performance we have. That's the one we're going to scrutinize heavily.
Yeah.
You know, we talked about, does it look bad if my student doesn't take honors or AP level courses in their intended major? It depends on the school. If they're trying to apply to MIT, which is really, really tough to get into, or one of the Ivy Leagues, or Caltech, or Stanford, maybe you might really want to push it. I also think about not overwhelming your student and taxing them. The idea is sometimes it's better to get an A in an honors than a C in an AP class. So if it's going to be detrimental and they're going to be overwhelmed with AP classes and their grades suffer as a result of it, don't do that. Don't overwhelm them. So there's a bit of a balancing act you want to have. Is it bad if it's not in their intended major? Not necessarily. Even some of those really competitive schools are dialing back whether they have to have coursework in specific areas that they want to study, simply because some schools don't offer those programs, those majors. I would say if you're looking for a STEM program, you might want to push towards that calculus. That might be helpful for them. But if they're not pushing on for a highly selective school or a highly selective program, it's really just making sure that they don't overwhelm themselves. We talk about this holistic view of the student. Maybe you want to dial back some of the APs and do a little bit more in the extracurriculars. Maybe they wanted to join a club or join a sports team, and that's where they want to channel some of their energy, not entirely on a full suite of APs. I like to think if your student only did AP classes and didn't do anything else, that's also a bit of a, let's call it a yellow flag,
Right.
because we want to see a more well-rounded student.
And then I know there's also this concept about like the well-rounded versus also in academics of the pointy student.
Yeah.
There, because sometimes I actually have a student right now. She is a math genius. No idea on there, but English is her weakest subject on there. So for her, she might be doing AP in her math subjects, but she might be doing her A level in English class. And that's because that's what's gonna be the best balance for her, and kind of recognizing that English is her weaker subject, but math she can go all out for. And vice versa, sometimes we have students who are really humanities focused and they can do those honors AP classes in there, but maybe the math and science is their weaker, so they stick with the A level. And then this kind of ties in with the kind of what courses should my students take, they need to take in their as well. So even though we have a 3-year math graduation requirement, colleges want 4 years. The science, it will probably also depend on what kind of potential major they might want to do. Like if it's engineering, yes, you definitely take that physics class, like the full year of physics instead of like the intro physics class we have. If you're thinking of going into international politics, you probably want to continue with that 4th year of the world language in there too. So this is kind of the part why we emphasize students coming to meet with us, because it's so individualized. If I had students that I want to do business, especially like kind of international business, I don't want to take Spanish anymore. I'm like, maybe you should do Spanish, continue with that.
Another thing with AP courses, oftentimes colleges accept those as college credit depending on the score of the exam. So if they got a 5 in AP Calc, they might be able to get credit for a few credits worth.
Like an intro-level calculus at
Yeah,
college.
and that can save both time and money for a student.
That's right.
We have students who can transfer in at Emerson up to a full year's worth of
Right.
credits. So you could actually turn what would normally be a 4-year degree into a 3-year degree.
Right.
But not to, as much as you might be thinking from a financial or a time perspective, that's an advantageous. If your student suffers, that's not good either.
It's not what we're looking for, right. So, any other questions?
Yeah, I just have a question. I think you guys answered most of it, but so do you guys give them the transcript from freshman year to senior year?
Yes.
Yeah, that's why.
Yeah, we send it through SCORE, so
Okay.
we send all of our things electronically through
Okay.
SCORE. Most colleges accept electronically, only like a handful of them want it mailed. Only it's like QCC.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you also, you
We don't
mentioned
want
the foreign language, because it is not a requirement here, so really depending on the major, then you recommend them to keep taking it or not, right?
Yeah, and then also for the state universities here, they do expect 2 years,
2 years.
2 consecutive years, so it should be, if it's like Spanish 1, then Spanish 2, that's 2 consecutive years. If they do Spanish 1, decide they hate it, and then do French or Latin, that resets them
Gotcha.
on there.
But again, I think have the conversation with your student and us, because again, it also doesn't benefit a student to like hang in there with a world language. If they're really struggling, even if they want to study something where it might be helpful later on, I mean, if they're really struggling, it won't benefit them to get a C+ in a class when they could take a different elective and do much better, and maybe it's a better area of interest for them. And so again, just don't hesitate to ever reach out to us, because we need to have that conversation with you about your student individually.
Oh, so
Yeah.
on that note, we also have the seal of biliteracy, so if you speak like a language,
Thank
like
you.
a mother tongue
Yeah,
language
thank
at
you for
home,
coming.
they can try to take that seal of biliteracy test in like junior, senior year.
Yeah, she already does, but she's taking Spanish already, and she's skipped a level of Spanish because of that. She's working in her skip 1. So 2 years at least is good enough for her to show
Yeah.
on colleges.
Yeah, and especially if she advanced that way, see, those are all little good nooks and crannies that we want to know about.
Well, that's also what we talk about, why in different systems out there where it's test focused or exam focused, that kind of context would come out, let's say, in a school council recommendation or in their essay, or even just something that they would note to their admission counselor that you don't get from a 4-digit score.
Yeah, she loves languages, and she's like really creative, and she's also good at math and science, so we're trying to find I don't know. She
Yeah.
loves digital design, so
Like
maybe
a
something
good
like that.
fit
Yeah.
for her, yeah, that's great.
Did the,
Talk to her counselor.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
did the languages in middle school really count towards this?
Not for us.
No.
There are some school districts that will put an 8th grade language on a transcript, and that counts as 1 year for them. Shrewsbury doesn't do that, so it's only what they take here at the high school.
Some colleges don't even look at middle school
Yeah,
performance.
exactly.
Even if it's on the transcript,
Yeah, that's right.
it's kind of we don't at Emerson, but other schools might,
They
but a
don't.
lot of schools don't consider middle school performance at all. Even if they're taking an advanced level course at middle school.
So one question for the standard testing. So what the difference between SAT and ACT2? I mean,
That's a
those
good
things
question.
to college, do you prefer one or either one is okay?
No, in fact, we have what's called a concordance table. It's a translation of the scores back and forth. I'd say it's more regional than anything, where on the east and west coast, it's predominantly SAT. In the middle of the country, aside from some specific states, it's more SAT focused. It's really just availability of the tests. There's some bits out there that talk about that there are subtle differences between the tests. Generally speaking, colleges don't really care between the two of them because we have an equivalency score that goes back and forth. The really difference is the availability of the test. Sometimes there's more SATs offered than ACTs, and it's just a matter of fitting in your schedule. But predominantly, I'd say East and West Coast schools are more SAT focused, and predominantly kind of from the Appalachian Mountains to maybe the Rocky Mountains, that's more ACT territory.
Yeah.
Is it an
We-
either or?
Sorry.
It's either or,
It's
yeah.
either or.
You don't, there's really,
We are a test center for SAT. We are not a test center for ACT. So that's just to keep
it's
in mind.
just finding a testing center to do it.
Right.
Is it recommended to usually do that sophomore year or junior year?
Well, both tests are really designed for students in their junior year.
Yeah.
However, you